A little bit extra light. I think it's normally around about this time of year people start to get confident and optimistic about how the weather's going to pan out.
Well, I got up this morning and I can't remember. It must have been no long after 9 o'clock, and I opened the curtains and there was sunshine beaming through. So that for me generally is a good sign. I care more about the sun in the morning than I do at night.
Oh yeah, for
At night,
sure, for sure.
Lord, really, I'm going to be busy at night anyway. I can't stop myself, but in the morning when the sun's up early, it's like, in the winter, that's the thing I hate the most is that you're getting up like,
Dark.
middle of the morning and it's still dark outside and you're like, it's just like the morning time is a drain, especially if you've been through like a really bad depressive period. The morning's like the hardest time for me.
Oh, for sure, because I think like having been there myself, like when you're in a kind of a depressive state, like waking up is quite a painful experience. You're like, fuck, I'm still alive. And that, like, as much as that's, maybe a little bit lighthearted, it's the genuine experience of a lot of people. If you're not happy with your life, why would you be happy with, being forced to wake up every morning by the fucking sun?
Absolutely. And that effect lingers even when you're getting better. I mean, I think quite a lot of people have morning inertia. Something comes out of being, I think, I do blame the education system a little bit in this because, our education system's kind of based off this worker environment. And so we get our kids up at the crack of dawn to go to school, and all try and learn at the same rate and all the rest of it. And like, we try and get
at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's just not how human beings work.
Not at all. There's a study done a few years ago in Oxford. They basically, if you're under the age of 30 and someone is making you get up and go somewhere before 10 a.m., technically that's a type of torture. Your body is not ready for that. Like basically, like throughout our life, from when we're babies up until we're like old, elderly, or whatever, our bodies are constantly changing, and our body's need for sleep constantly changes. Babies sleep like 15, 20 hours a day. They sleep all the fucking time. With like older people, older people tend to go through a little phase of being early risers, and then have like sort of sleeps in the afternoon, and we change as the thing. When you're up until you're about 30, morning isn't your time. So teenagers wake up at like 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, and then they still spend all day going stretching, and then suddenly at like 10 o'clock at night they're alive and awake. It's not a coincidence that happens to everyone. It's just biology. It's that simple.
I mean, I wouldn't say it happens to everyone, but for a lot of people, or at least maybe the majority, most people would rather sleep in than get up.
And I think certainly like when you're that age, like when you're like a teenager, that's the kind of like I said, like as your body changes throughout your life, your need for sleep and your how you react to your environment changes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 28 now, and I don't mind. Like, if I can get up in the morning, I will. But it's not necessarily because I want it. It's because I enjoy the fact that I've now got more in my day, so I can relax more throughout the day as I'm awake. It means that my day is less intense. Well, if you're getting up,
make the most of it,
and you're working for 8 hours solid, and then you get home and you're absolutely dead. I hate that feeling. I hate that. I mean, I want to be steady throughout the day. So if I can get up early, it gives me time to I might be asleep for the first 3 hours, but I'll be awake.
Yeah, you'll get there. I think there's a lot to be said for morning, but at the same time, don't force yourself.
For sure.
As long as you're keeping busy and keeping well, it's the main thing.
I've realized now, I think learning how to listen to your body is more important than trying to obey any science. If I get up,
the original
if I wake up in the morning and I feel tired, I'll sleep a bit more. If I get up in the morning and I feel awake, I get up.
There's a story that goes from a couple of hundred years ago. When the British Empire first came to India, and for a lot of people, the idea of having a watch on your wrists was quite a novel thing. And the reports among the Indian people was the way they talked about these new British people who'd showed up was that they're very strange. They only eat when their wrist tells them to. Which is really this idea that what time's lunch? Well, lunch is at a particular time. And we've all had that experience. I'm sure that say it's like 11:30, 11:45, and you're starting to get hungry, and you're like, oh, am I allowed to eat lunch? Is it okay?
That's a thing now as well. Like people are doing like intermittent fasting. I actually watched this. I think that might have actually been on a Joe Rogan episode actually when we were talking about it. Maybe I can't remember. I listened to something recently about. I'm terrible for like remembering where stuff comes from. Like I have it with films. I have it with music. Like I just find it. I love it, and it develops my understanding. But I find it so hard to remember where I've got information from. But I think it's just because I'm someone who seeks a lot of stuff from so many different avenues that I get confused. But yeah, they were talking about that, and they were like taking the piss out of people who are like fasting until like exactly 1 o'clock, and then it gets to 1 o'clock, and they're like, "Yes, I can eat." And it's like, if that's your reaction, then you're not. That's probably not good for you.
Yeah, you're not doing it right. It's what it is. Like there's a lot to be said for intermittent fasting. I mean, I think that the idea behind it is that humans have been on the planet for how many hundreds of thousands of years, and it's only really for the last 50 to 100 years that we've had access to constant food. We always have food. If you want food, you can get some. We've got so much food that in some places in the world, the government sends police to guard skips full of food so hungry people don't steal food that would otherwise go to the bin. It's we have so much food. And, yeah, exactly. This is it. I've heard stories of certain upmarket supermarkets that pour bleach over the food in the bin, which is it's absolutely ridiculous. The really difficult relationship that we have with food and with nutrition in this country. It's really really upsetting actually when you kind of think that.
One.
Oh no, I'm done.
The thing with food is like, I don't know. Like one of the things I like about Islam, for example, is the fact that they have this deliberate fast, and it's got absolutely nothing to do with their diet. It's to remind them what it's like to be without food, so that when they do have access to this constant food, they don't overeat and overconsume for the sake of overconsumption, which is something in the West, that, and particularly in America, overconsumption is just through the fucking roof, where it's like,
it's a big portion.
It's not just the diet, and it's not just that, it's the stimulation of getting something in you all the time, being like, I need to be constantly stimulated, where it's like, blah, blah. I mean, I've got a Coke, or sorry, it's not a Coke, it's a Freeway Cola.
Oh, wow. Do they still, where'd you get Freeway Cola?
Lidl, bro.
No way.
For people who don't like how intense Coke is, Freeway's the way to go, because it's a bit more mellow on the carbon.
All right.
A bit more like
you get yourself a sponsorship.
Yeah, I know. I do blast a wee product out every now and then. I'm like, here, I need to get there one day. It'll come. I've got a bio hat on today. It's actually my flatmate's hat, because this is technically still his room, because he went to his parents at Christmas. He's not came back yet, so I've just kind of moved in. And then I was wearing this Adidas hat for the past wee while, and I seen the pirate hat on the wall, and I was like, nah, got to represent the boys on the podcast today.
Do it too.
Yeah, we'll move on. So, yeah, do you want to give people a quick introduction to you and what you're kind of doing?
Sure. So my name's Dan. I am the founder, the guy who works at a company called the Hemp Community. We are a social enterprise based in Leith, and we sell CBD products. And more to the point, we support people to use them as a means to facilitating good health. So I like to talk about health. I like to talk about wellness and science and culture. I also I live in Leith as well. I'm a creative. I like to write songs and tell stories. And I'm also doing a master's at the University of Stirling. So I'm a busy bee, but I love talking about weed. Weed is my favorite. I love talking about weed. I'm thoroughly in love with the plant, and it's why I'm here. So there we go.
Yeah, I definitely don't mind a conversation about weed. It's funny, I was speaking to my friend. I was telling my friend that I was having this conversation. I was like, I want to try and not get too excited about just talking about how good weed is. And I want to try and make sure that we talk about it rather than like talk with each other about it. Do you know what I mean?
It's one of these things
one of the things I think, especially when it comes to CBD in terms of like using it for health benefits and all the rest of it, especially here, is like a lot of the time when people look at this information up online, it's confusion. It's like, you've got people saying, oh, we don't really know what it does and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, that's kind of also the case, but also kind of like, it's not going to kill you. And looking after yourself is looking after yourself. CBD is just one of these little things that might be able to give you that little extra boost, give you that little
extra tool.
If you are proactive in using it in your wellness, life. If you're, if healthy living is part of your lifestyle, there's no reason this can't really be a part of it. And
pretty much, yeah.
Podcast is to get rid of some of that confusion, to tell people like, what do we know, what don't we know, and if you're not really big on the CBD, if you're not really big into like looking after yourself, then turn the fucking podcast off and go fucking elsewhere. Do you know what I mean? It's like, if you don't want to look after yourself, cool, then don't take CBD. Bye. It's all good. You don't need to go fucking killing us for it. Like, we're all right. We'll sit here and take our oil drops. Don't worry about us.
It's all good. Yeah. Easy peasy. Yeah. I mean, I think you're right. Most people don't get a balanced education on what cannabis is and how cannabis works. And when I say most people, I mean people in the public, I mean people at home, I mean people who work in hospitals and people who work in universities also don't really know what this is and how it works. And we get this phrase that comes up a lot in the media, in articles and videos and stuff, that we don't know enough about it, or there's not enough evidence. And that phrase, not enough evidence, is meant in a very technical way that refers to a specific type of evidence pertaining to a particular method of investigation conducted over a particular specified period of time. And basically, it's a very technical, very scientific meaning of the word evidence. It doesn't mean evidence as in, well, I know it works for me. That kind of evidence doesn't really count. The problem is, I think, that the policies that are made about cannabis are generally written by people who don't really understand it from a first-person perspective. They don't have any particularly compelling experience or any reason one way or the other to investigate. For the majority of the population, cannabis isn't a big deal and it's not really on their radar. But for a very small number of people in the population, cannabis is a life-changing product. It's something that improves their quality of life and can actually cause them to live longer, healthier lives. It's not just a recreational product, although it does have recreational activity or application, and it's not just a medicine, even though it has medical application. It's quite a complex thing, cannabis. It's not new by any stretch of the imagination. It's been on the planet for about 25 million years. And we've understood it from a scientific perspective since the late 60s. So even though we've been studying, like doctors have been using cannabis for thousands of years in human society, it was only really in the 1960s that someone looked at it underneath a microscope and figured out what it was that was doing the stuff. And we called these chemicals cannabinoids. Cannabinoids are a family of chemicals. There are hundreds of cannabinoids. I'm not going to bother trying to list them because it's actually quite a boring list. Most of them begin with CB or TH. These are the two sides of what the cannabis plant produces. You got things like CBD and THC, and those are the two I'm mostly going to focus on because, like I say, the rest of it is useful to understand, but it's not necessarily super important to lock down in extreme detail at the start because it is, like I say, it's a big pool to dip into. So we don't want to dive into too deep into the tertiary cannabinoids or whatever. Basically, CBD and THC are the main ingredients of cannabis. They interact with our bodies. Our bodies use THC and CBD to keep us healthy, to keep us happy, and to kind of keep us balanced. So they do lots of little jobs, and this is why people use cannabis for just about everything. Some people use cannabis to help them sleep. Some people smoke weed before the gym because it gives them a boost. How can the same drug do the same thing? How can the same drug do completely different things? Well, it's because it's not the same drug. It's quite a complex plant. There are about 5,000 different species or different varieties, strains of cannabis. Each one has its own unique blend of cannabinoids like CBD and THC, and also chemicals called terpenes. Terpenes are what give each strain their distinctive smell. Yeah, exactly, right. And this is the thing, the smells are important, and this is actually a really important thing. So if anyone's listening to this, and if you're someone who's interested in shopping around for cannabis and getting the best bang for your buck, getting the best bud for your buck, the trick is smell it first. Don't go by the percentages. Don't go by the reviews. The only review you need is your nose. The nose knows. Give it a smell. This is it's what you'll be able to tell the difference between what you like and what you don't like Generally, by just giving it a sniff, it's
If
useful.
you pick up a piece of food and it smells like shite, you're not going to eat it, are you?
Yeah,
Whereas,
there's a
like,
reason.
cannabis users will quite often be like, "Oh, I don't know, it smells a bit strong. I'll smoke it and see what it's like." It's like, no, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
When someone there was a period where I was probably like that, and it's definitely something I think that having this conversation will hopefully help to solve. But I did eventually get to the point where, like, if I went and met the dealer and he gave me this weed and I smelled it and it smelled like shit, I'd be like, bro, I'm not buying this. Like, what the fuck is this? Like, I don't want that shit. And you start to learn, and you start to learn by this smell that's like, look, the good shit seems to work better. So stop selling me this smelly rank stuff.
Yeah, and this is the kind of one of the really big problems. The way that cannabis is legislated for right now, like the laws that we have in this country, aren't really fit for purpose. Nobody, like, you go to your dealer and your dealer tells you what he has. Do you believe him? I mean, he might be a good dealer, but he might not. He might be lying. It might not even be real weed. You don't know. There's no quality control. There's nothing there to protect you as a consumer. And ultimately, anyone who's using cannabis, regardless of how they choose to use it, so whether that's a pipe or a bong or a little cake or whatever you want, you're probably using it with an intention of looking after your health.
Yeah.
Even if that just means, I smoke a joint at night, so it helps me get a good night's sleep. Well, that saves you from taking a sleeping pill, so that technically counts as medicine. And this is one of the things I focus on a lot with my work, is that we need to be looking at cannabis not just as an issue or a problem that needs to be discussed and solved. Actually, we've done most of the discussion. We understand the problem in quite a lot of detail, and we know what the potential solutions are. What we need to do is change how people think about this and change how they can access it, because regardless of what laws the government puts in place to prohibit or restrict the access to cannabis, it still exists and it always will. It's never going to go away. It's a part of life on Earth. It's a fact of life on Earth. If nothing else, in the human body, we have a network of receptors that responds to this plant. And because of that, there will always be a demand. There's been a demand on Earth for cannabinoids for millions of years, and there will continue to be a demand on cannabinoids for millions of years from now. It's not going.
There's definitely going to be a demand.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the thing, it's with the war on drugs. The war on drugs has recently passed its 50-year anniversary. In fact, this year is the 50th anniversary of
I mean, it's 50 years. Like, only 50 years ago, they were like, "Here, cannabis. We should probably stop that." Eh? Like,
50 years ago, 50 years ago, it was legal for a tobacco company to pay a doctor to sell you cigarettes. That's how far we've come in 50 years. In 50 years ago, there was no such thing as credit cards. 50 years ago, the internet was something only the military had access to. And 50 years ago, we'd only just got over the summer of love. That, it's in its historical context, the war on drugs and the formalization of drug prohibition, it was a reactionary measure primarily led by the American government, but picked up by every other government, because it allowed the governments of the world a tool to control and arrest people. And it was a way of controlling one of the main levers of the economy. This is another thing that is important to understand when we talk about cannabis. It's not just medicine and smoking weed, and there's also, you can make biodiesel out of hemp, you can make clothes out of hemp, you can build a house out of hemp, you can make a battery and run your car on hemp. You can do almost anything with hemp that you can do with plastic or cotton, and it grows in the dirt. It grows so fast and so easily in the dirt that we just call it weed. That's how good it is at growing in the dirt. Like, for example, you could trees, we get most of our paper from trees. If instead of cutting down trees, we just grew hemp, we could not only we'd save a whole bunch of forests, we'd save a whole bunch of biodiversity, and we'd also, take more carbon dioxide out of the air, because hemp is better at carbon capture than your average tree. So, humanity's insistence on pursuing the drug war as an ideological thing has not only held us back 50 years in terms of medical application, but it's also held back our economy from exploring one of the most valuable resources on the planet. Imagine if every person, imagine if every young person, right, you're going to like your career day or whatever at high school, and you get the option of going to work at the hemp factory. 100% you would be there, right? You'd want to see what was going on in there.
I've got something to say on this actually, right? You go to the school career day, right? And there's a little stall there, and the guy's being like, here, come and work in this hemp field. We make good products. We have a nice time. We're all like, fun-loving people. We're just here to look after the world. Right next to that same stall is some guy trying to recruit you to go into other countries with guns and shit. Like the same guy is trying to recruit a 16-year-old to go to war. Like there's the guy right next to that guy. You've got one guy taking you to war and one guy trying to get you to grow a plant. This guy trying to get you to grow the plant is the guy who's not allowed at career day.
It's bizarre.
Like, I get on a country level, there's stuff we can't possibly understand, especially when it comes to government and policy, because it is like these things are landscapes of society that, unless you're in, are really hard to comprehend at a certain level. So I understand there's things about the armed forces that we don't quite understand. But the fact that this guy isn't allowed to grow this plant that pretty much has very little effect compared to at least tobacco and alcohol and other things that we're allowed access to with barely any restriction.
Yeah, as long as you're 18, fill your boots. It's
sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, I mean, you're right. It's bizarre, like what's legal and what's not legal isn't really based on any measure of harm. So the way we're all kind of brought up, like what we're brought up to believe is that, we've got our class C drugs and our class B drugs and our A drugs, and you've got the really dangerous drugs, and you've got the okay drug, then you've got the really safe drugs. And it turns out that it's actually, again, it's not that easy to kind of separate them all because, say, for example, something like ibuprofen, perfectly harmless, right? Just a little, but, what if you're taking a couple of ibuprofen every day, every other day for most of your life? Did you know that 90% of the population of the UK, so that's roughly 50 to 55 million people in the UK, are taking at least one pharmaceutical drug per month for their whole lives? Like that is like when you think about like the amount of potential harm that there is in constantly dosing ourselves with little bits of paracetamol, little bits of this, little bit of that, little just a little cigarette here and there and all that.
Sorry, I take an antihistamine every day pretty much for allergies related to eczema and dust and things, and I've already kind of got a bit of blocked nose. It's just like, and the thing is as well is like there's the thing as well, especially in my experience growing up now, is like I didn't grow up in a particularly like poor family, at least I didn't think so. But like, my gran worked in a pub her whole life, and my granddad was an electrician in the mines. Do you know what I mean? And I grew up in a household where people were smoking and stuff like that, and pretty much all my family have got asthma and allergy problems. Now, like, I don't, they try and pin these things to genes and other things, but they really don't take environment into things enough. And they don't take your experience as a human being growing up through different environments into account. One thing with like drug dealers, for example, is like, if I was to go and buy, I've not been smoking any THC weed for, at least probably 2-3 weeks now. But the guy I get my weed off, he's a really nice guy. Like, it's like, he's really fun loving. He works really hard. Like, he's a normal guy in society. We're really good friends. He sells me nice stuff. It always smells nice. It always smokes nice. If I do want to get some stuff for Cali, I can get it. All the rest of it. When I was growing up, that was no the guy I was buying off it, and it's no the guy that some folk buy off now. Occasionally, when I'll be around Bristol Square, some wee boy will come in and be like, "Right, mate, you want to buy some weed?" That guy's not selling me good stuff. Do you know what I mean?
No. This is the
people who are growing up in underprivileged communities, because they dealers don't give a fuck. All those junkies and stuff you see on the street, someone sells them drugs, and they're probably
they have to get it from somewhere.
Drug users. That's the thing. Some of those drug dealers aren't drug users; they're literally just bad people. And when it's not regulated, that's what you have. You can't go and buy shitty alcohol off someone these days. When I was younger, there was a period where you could buy fake alcohol from like corner shops and stuff like that. Yeah. Whereas nowadays, that can't really happen. Pretty much, it's almost impossible, at least from my experience. It probably still does happen in certain communities where the shops aren't quite, where there's no one going in to regulate them ever. Yeah, you don't really know what they're selling. I mean, I bought a Pepsi the day in a shop. I'm not going to say which one, but it was like, it was out of date by a few months. So, and it wasn't a small shop as well, I'll add.
Really?
But so like, there's no one to go in and check the shop, check the shelves, see how long stuff's been there for, see where it's came from. It's like, if this company's got an invoice for 12 bottles of vodka, no one's going in to make sure that they've not got 24 on the shelf.
Yeah, I mean, here's a fun fact for you, a little bit of local knowledge about Edinburgh. Did you know, right? So obviously, if you're going to open a shop or a restaurant or a bar, anywhere that's going to serve alcohol, you have to have a license, right? And there's this whole licensing thing, and you keep an eye on everybody, make sure everybody's following the rules and all that. How many licensing officers are there serving Edinburgh? The whole of Edinburgh, so the capital city of Scotland, the city with the highest proportion of licensed premises per capita in Europe. How many licensing officers?
It'll be like less than 5 or something. That'll be one guy. Fuck.
One person. So this is one of it's one of the weird things.
Every single establishment and check every single beverage. No, he goes in with.
Of course he doesn't.
Yep. He'll walk to the door.
Of course they don't. Part of the problem is, it's something I noticed when I first moved to Scotland. I'm not originally from Scotland. I'm from Ireland, and I moved over here about 15 years ago. And one of the things I noticed really, really quickly was how liberal Scottish culture is regarding alcohol. And I don't mean that in like a kind of a drinking with the boys kind of way. I mean in a kind of like, you can walk into any post office, any corner shop, any phone box in Scotland, and you can get served alcohol. Every cinema, every cafe, everywhere. Edinburgh during the Fringe. Yeah. Well, this is it. And one of the things that we know about alcohol is that it's quite dangerous, not just in terms of the acute risk. So what happens to you when you get drunk and fall down some stairs and twist your ankle. But we know that like in 10, 20, 30 years time, the gradual accumulation of damage from that alcohol is going to build up and build up and build up until you hit a kind of a tipping point, by which point it's too late. It might be the case that, like my case anyway, is that if we were to try and encourage people, maybe not encourage people to smoke weed instead, but if they had the option, if they had the choice to use some decent cannabis that was grown locally and checked by a nice man in a white coat and sold by someone who's been trained and is in a respectable establishment and all this, we could have a much safer society, a society that can work hard and chill out at night and not necessarily use the old tools, because I think that alcohol does Scotland a huge disservice.
And you know what? I think there's a stigma here as well, because I've witnessed this as well growing up here, that a lot of people who have come, especially into the cities, there's like, I remember you were saying something today, like, because this is all to do with, this is lifestyle, right? This is what people don't realize is like, there's a lifestyle in Scotland that has existed for I don't know how long that's related to alcohol and related to the fact that this is a hard country to live in. And these days it's becoming a bit of an easier country to live in. There's a lot more opportunity and there's a lot more opportunity to live healthy lives. But in the past, this has been an extremely hard place to live. It's hard to farm. Sure. It's cold for a lot of the year. Like no wonder people drank, because it's like the living here is really difficult. When I was growing up, it's like, in the summer, my grand's favorite hobby was just lying in the sun, because it's like it was just lying there. And these days, it's like, to sunbathe, you need to be a certain kind of person. Most people, when the sun comes out in the summer, they're using that energy to get work done. My grand was just like, and done, yeah. Because when it comes through, when you see the sun in the sky in the summer, you're like, as a Scottish person, it's like 12 degrees outside and you're pretty much naked.
Taps off.
That's how much we crave the sun, because like the reality is a lot of time it's not there. We have vitamin D deficiencies.
Oh, big time, yeah. It's actually a massive...
People come here and they don't drink as much. And so they're proactive, they're busy, they're like yourself, they're starting these things, they're starting these social, and they're trying to do all these things. And to actual people who have grown up in local Scottish families, you people are almost targets. Like I'm putting myself in there as well now. I'm moving into this world of being like, no, we need to actually start looking after ourselves, because we're just wasting away here by ruining our bodies and the rest of it. But the average person, it's like that alcohol is something that you start when you're young, when you're like 14, 15, 16 years old, sometimes younger. And by the time you get to 18, 19, you don't realize that you're working Monday to Friday, and unless you drink at the weekend, Monday to Friday sucks.
Yeah. Well,
Because
this is the thing.
you need that kind of like, you work really hard, and at the weekend you just go crazy over the top. And I find, like, you know, it's really hard at the weekend in town to try and have an intellectual conversation with someone over booze who's a proper Scottish person, because they're coming up here into the middle of the city to just get fucked. Like they don't want to have
it's
to
a party city
at all. They want to come and just go way over the top and totally fuck themselves up. And Monday to Friday, these people look like really nice, productive people who are, you know, putting their family together, getting a house. But the reality is, in 30, 40 years, they're going to become extremely bitter, horrible old people. And I've seen it happen in my own lifetime. And
you're so optimistic, Reece.
A lot of people who come here, like foreigners, students, things like that, they really don't understand that environment at all. And to them, it's like they come in, they see all these people who are sexist, misogynistic, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you've got no idea what it's like to grow up in a Scottish family here, where half your family are smoking and drinking and moaning at each other. And like, you know, and it's an intense family dynamic, the Scottish family, like the old Scottish family. And like, that is changing, but there's not a process where like you can just come in and be like, you know, when they restricted the alcohol sale, a lot changed, and people actually did get a lot healthier and all the rest of it, and things did change. But at the same time, I've now noticed a lot more of the younger kids are now doing weed as kind of like a recreational nice drug, and it's not really fucking them up as far as I can see. It's like if they're suffering mental health issues, it's maybe no like amazing for them because they will start to depend on it. But in terms of like drinking and the rest of it, they're going for way harder drugs when they're younger now. They're going on things like ketamine and 2CB and all this kind of shit. And I'm like, look, experiment with drugs, but just chill the fuck out.
I think that
you don't know what it's going to be like in the future when you've been
the two most important things when it comes to like planning a drug experience are set and setting. Set refers to your mindset. So if you're going to take some drugs, you should try and make sure you have a rough idea of what to expect. And don't do it on a bad day. Don't do it in a day where you're having you've been a bit of a grump, because we all know.
I'll be honest, the past couple of days I was feeling a bit shit, and like I said, I've been coming off smoking. I've dealt with depression, so I have up and down days. And the other, like, I've been working really hard on the podcast. I've been speaking to people, doing lots of stuff. But the other day I just felt like shit, and I walked up to my local shop, and I was sitting having a conversation with a guy there who I know really well, and I bought myself a half bottle of Buckfast, and I said to him, I was like, I know this isn't going to solve my problems, but it's like this internal unease and disease with what was happening around me, and the whole world starts to feel intense, and it creeps in. And that's the only thing I know other than weed that helps mellow those feelings out and help me cope. So it's something I'm aware of and trying to get away from. But when shit gets really, really hard, I can't not go and buy a drink. I can't not. And you know, when I woke up the next day, like, I had a good sleep because I fucking pretty much knocked myself out with alcohol. But the next day, I just didn't feel quite right. But the thing is with the hangovers, like, it kind of lets you escape from all the stuff you're thinking about because you're too hungover to think about shit. So you kind of get and by the time you come out that day or two later, I then realize that I feel kind of back to normal and everything's right. And, you know, that used to be a daily occurrence. And as time goes on, maybe like once every 2-3 weeks, maybe even a month, I'll need to have a drink. But like, it's definitely in me. Like, that thing is in there being like, this is the only thing that makes that pain go away. And it's really lack of coping mechanisms. Lack of health.
It's something that like we pick up at a young age, like all these things, like all these habits that people pick up, whether they're Yeah, and this is it, like, and especially with something like alcohol, like because as a society, Western Europe is very tolerant of alcohol. So like, you know, it's, you know, you're 12, 13 years old, you know, you might someone might sneak you a beer at a party, or, you know, when you're like a kid, your dad might give you a wee sip of his beer, or, you know,
and WKD or something like that.
Just as look, you can have a wee drink in the garage with your friends.
Or a Guinness when you're like camping with your uncle or something, and he gives you a wee Guinness by the campfire, and you're just giving a 13-year-old kid a whole can of Guinness. What are you up to, man? You're
madness. And the thing is, like it's like if we go back maybe a couple of hundred years ago, like say a couple of hundred years ago, alcohol is pretty much the only way you could clean water. So there was a cholera outbreak in London in the 1800s, and everybody got sick. Loads of people died, and the only people who didn't get sick were the guys who worked at the brewery. Why? Because they didn't drink water. They didn't drink from the tap. They drank from the barrel. So for thousands of years, this is part of the reason why why there's such a culture of distilling in Scotland, is that if you didn't know the quality of your water, at the very least, if there was alcohol in it, it wouldn't kill you. Alcohol is very good at doing a lot of it's good at killing things. It's good at doing it's good at breaking down grease and fats, and it's good at it's good for lubricating social, but it's also good at killing germs.
Disclaimer though, just a wee disclaimer for anyone listening: it's not going to cure COVID.
No, it's not that type of
drinking alcohol isn't going to keep you COVID free. Unfortunately, it doesn't cure the flu. It can help cure some of the symptoms, but it's not going to cure the flu.
If anything, it'll make it worse.
Anything
it's one of the it's one of the things like what's and one of the things again what we see around like both we see it in Scotland, Scottish culture especially, like when people have a toast they say slàinte, which means to your health, as you drink something which is proven to cause cancer. As you drink something
like Nostrovia and stuff, it pretty much means
Nostrovia, like, Prost, Sante, all these to your health. And this is the thing: you go back in time, and like humans have used just about everything as a medicine at one point or another. So, for example, there's a Scotch whiskey called Lafroig. Lafroig comes in a bright green bottle, right? Green bottle, white and black label. Looks quite medicinal. Smells a little bit medicinal too. That's not a coincidence. During the 1920s, when alcohol was prohibited in America, Lafroig could only export their whiskey if it was sold as a medicine. So you would have to go to your doctor and be prescribed a bottle to take 2 shots a night with water or not, whatever. I'll
tell you something right now. You might find this interesting. So I've been very fortunate enough to grow up in an environment where I've been around my great granddad, and he passed away when I think he was 94 or 96, something like that. And he was working well into his 80s. And he also used to cover his dinner in salt, and I mean cover like dinner salt, right? But he never drank, right? But he would gargle TCP every night.
Really? Like the disinfectant?
It's basically an antiseptic, disinfectant thing, blah, blah, that you would put in your mouth, gargle around and spit it out. But he never drank. When I drink a Lafroig, TCP is the first thing it reminds me of. The smell, I would smell it in the bathroom. Like I'd smell this horrible like thing that's like TCP. It really is like gargling antiseptic. It's just weird. And he used to do that every single night. And like I said, he lived to be 94 years old or something like that. So he did all right for himself. But when I drink a Lafroig, I actually get that kind of taste, and it's kind of nostalgic for me in a weird way when I drink it. It's what I like about it is that kind of like it's soapy flavor.
Yeah, there's one of the like I used to work in the Scotch whiskey industry for a very short time. I sold whiskey at a tourist attraction. I wasn't actually involved in anything more interesting than being a tour guide. But one of the things that when it comes to like tasting whiskey or nosing whiskey, it's all about memory, and it's about jogging your memory. And I apply the same theory to using cannabis. Like when I smell a bag of weed, it's the same tool that you're using to sniff whiskey. So all these people say, oh, there's no difference between all the different weeds. And like, yeah, and there's no difference between any of the whiskeys or any of the wines or any of the beers. And basically all cheese is the same. So why do we have a whole aisle? What a waste of time. Like, having these differences and having these choices are really, really important. And it's something that I think that people in Scotland are, for the most part, we have restricted choices. There are, we can't change the environment that we grew up in. We can't change what's happened to us in the past, but we can make choices about what happens just going forward. And I think that when the government steps in with legislation to restrict things like cannabis, what they're really doing is restricting one of the most useful choices that we have. Like one of the most useful resources that the planet has to offer is the cannabis plant. Like I said earlier, you can build houses of it. You can make print newspapers on it and wear it as a shirt. You can also turn it into a medicine, and it's really fun. Great. And it's illegal. Oh,
You know, like where it's
oh,
like
well.
heroin. How many things can you do with a heroin plant, for example? You know, or the seed that heroin comes from. Do you know what I mean? It's like that's illegal because, like, yeah, okay, it can fuck you up as well. And yeah, there are studies onto the benefits of using these drugs for psychotherapies and things like that as well. But you can't grow them and make a fucking t-shirt.
Well, with
Can you?
opium,
Or maybe
sort of.
you know that.
So the seed that we get heroin from is the opium poppy. The opium poppy is also called the bread seed poppy. So if you ever see like a roll in a shop and it's got those little black seeds in it,
Yeah, I've heard
those
this,
are bread
yeah.
poppy seeds. Those are poppy seeds, and they are from the bread seed poppy, which is the source of opium. Now, technically, you could grow a field of bread seed poppy, opium poppies. You could grow a field of those as long as you promise not to turn it into heroin. That is literally easier to do that. It's easier. There are fewer restrictions in the way to do that than there are in trying to set up a hemp farm. If you wanted to start your own rope company, you're going to make hemp rope. You need to apply for a license from the Home Office. You need to get a lawyer involved. You need to get a whole bunch of guys to come out and inspect your property. You have to make sure that if you're growing industrial hemp, which, by the way, doesn't get you high and is not that similar to the stuff that's recreational. If you're going to grow industrial hemp, it has to be far enough away from a road or footpath that nobody can see it, just in case they get any ideas. There's a guy I know who worked at the Botanic Gardens in Edinburgh. So Botanic Gardens, they grow exotic plants from all over the world. And funnily enough, because of their position, because of where they are, and the permissions that they have in place, they have a license to grow hemp. They have a hemp growing license at the Royal Botanic Gardens. However, they don't grow it because they don't have a research license. To get a research license, the reason they need a research license is because in order to grow it, if you're going to grow it, it's going to be for people to see. It's going to be on display. That technically counts as a learning experience, which means you might as well be a university and you just need to pay that couple of grand for a research license. It's really, really bizarre. It doesn't make any sense. And again, it just restricts people and restricts the choices that we have. With I work in the CBD industry, so I am used to seeing thousands of different brands of CBD, different products, pictures of farms across Europe. All of the CBD products in the UK, every single one of them started off life on a different landmass. There is no CBD in the UK grown in the UK because our system is so badly organized or so badly skewed to favor pharmaceutical companies. If you're a pharmaceutical...
One farm down south now, like one big indoor place.
There's that's okay. I was just about to go on to that. There are a couple of companies that grow cannabis and export it. So there's a couple of companies. One big farm in Norfolk, that's the one, the indoor one. It's 45 acres, so it's a giant indoor farm. They have row upon row upon row of cannabis. They have lots of high THC strains and low THC strains. They also have high CBD strains and mixes. So they do a lot of breeding. Lots of proprietary work going on there, all the intellectual property. They sell this product to a pharmaceutical company. The pharmaceutical company process it, they bottle it, they label it, and then they export it to other countries. So the UK, as we speak, the UK is the world's largest exporter of medical cannabis. Now, that's not really too much of a badge of honor, no matter how you look at it. Because on the one hand, it's like, oh, great, we're world's #1 exporter. There's a reason why very few other countries export medical cannabis. There's not a lot of medical cannabis that goes around on the international market because it's a waste of time. You can just grow it and put it in a bottle yourself. In Thailand, they legalized medical cannabis about 2 years ago, and within 6 months, they had reformed their medical systems to the point where disused wings of hospitals were being converted into grow rooms. Parts of old wards and clinics were being turned into oil extraction rooms, and on their lunch break, nurses would just nip down and maybe trim some buds for themselves for the weekend. Like, they changed it so quickly and so rapidly. And meanwhile, in the UK, the government has tied everything up so that you can get a license, but it's going to cost you. And you can do all this, but you need to know somebody. And if you're anybody else, you can just go whistle, because it's not really medicine if you grow it.
Yeah.
It doesn't really add up.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that, like, yeah, I mean, the cannabis industry in the UK just is crazy, because I mean, it's just like, it is that thing of being like, yeah, it fucking grows everywhere. So why are you exporting? Just, yeah, there's so much confusion around it. Yeah. That's what it is. It's this lack of transparency, being like, yeah, but like, why is it still, like, you know, the government's gives you all these reasons, but the fact they don't even really give you reasons. They just say that they're doing stuff, but they're not really doing anything. They're just keeping it where it is. And I don't
just
really
waving it on. In 2018, there was a little boy from Northern Ireland who has severe epilepsy and autism, and he uses medical cannabis. Medical cannabis seems to stop his seizures. And you know what? I'm not a doctor, but you know, his doctor thinks it's a pretty good idea, and all the other doctors that have seen this kid think it's a pretty good idea. And yet, when he went through an airport with his medicine, it was taken off him by UK customs agents. Within 24 hours, he was taken to a hospital, and then there was a huge PR storm. There was reporters and cameras everywhere. How can the government do this? The wee boy is dying. The wee boy, and it all just hinges on this little bit of oil. Just a little drop of oil would save just the wee boy. Save the wee boy. So the Home Secretary stepped up to the plate and he said, "I will now declare medical cannabis real. Hurrah!" And he signed a little bit of paper, and they made it go away. But it didn't really make it go away, because that little boy still can't get his medicine from the NHS. He has to get it from a Canadian company, which means he's had to go back and forth to Canada to pick up prescriptions, which is insane, because again, there's a 45-acre greenhouse in Norfolk growing essentially the same stuff. I mean, okay, it's not gone.
Yeah, that's the thing that's weird, is like they're growing it and exporting it, and we can't use it here.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, yeah, what's happened, like I say, like the government, you know, made it look, they made a big song and dance, and made a very clear point that the law must be changed, but more importantly, the law must be seen to be changed. So it's very much just a performance. In the 3 years since the law on medical cannabis changed, you can count on one hand the number of people who've got cannabis through their doctor on the NHS. You can, however, count quite a few private clinics that have sprung up. So around the country, there are private clinics that you can pay for the doctor, and then you can pay for the prescription, and you won't get in trouble because it's all legal. But you've just paid £90 to hear a doctor tell you that, yeah, weed might help. I could do that for free. Save your money. That doctor should be going saving someone's life. Leave it to the stoners. You know what I mean? Like, this is the thing. Like, I don't say that like doctors and medical professionals shouldn't be involved. They absolutely should be involved. But the way that the industry has been ring fenced, so that there is no access for anyone outside of an affluent few. Like, yeah, if you have a few £100,000 or a couple of million sitting in a bank account, open a cannabis clinic, hire a doctor, and then just watch the money pour in. It's a captive market, and we already know it works. Even better, as an investment, it's actually very safe because it doesn't kill anybody. So you're never going to get some kind of class action lawsuit. That's just never going to happen. No one's ever sued big weed. It doesn't happen. There's been countless studies done that in countries where access to cannabis is more liberal and more like easily, so legal, for want of a better word. You can walk into a dispensary or a coffee shop. What we see when we look at these societies is it's much of a muchness. Nothing gets worse. A lot of things get better. There's a lot of money. There's a lot of new jobs. There's a lot of industry and economy. There's a lot of hustle and a lot of grind around that, because guess what? People love weed, and we love working hard for weed. You know, I love putting in the extra time.
The people I know who are using weed recreationally, right? And, you know, And like, I definitely know people who are using weed recreationally where it's not good for them, you know, where I can see how it like negatively affects them.
Mm.
But if that was if that weed was legalized and there were coffee shops and things like that, all those people I know who are suffering would instantly have better lives because they would now have jobs that they would actually like to fucking do.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
most of the
totally.
time, that's why they're fucking feeling like shit, is because we didn't want to be a fucking joiner or a fucking plumber, and we didn't want to go to university. Like, the jobs that we actually want aren't here because we're such a small country, and we're watching countries like America where, you know, cunts can literally fly drones for a living. You know, like they can race drones in this like drone league with like VR headsets and like blah, 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 blah. And it's like, I want to do that. How do I do that? And it's like, oh, well, you're gonna have to like, you have to leave school, and you have to make some money, and then you have to move to America, and you're gonna have to make your living there, and then you're gonna have to save up money and get involved in a league. And it's like, no, I want to do that shit here. And like those kind of jobs just don't exist. And then you look at the cannabis market there, and you're thinking to yourself, like, all these little like lazy bums and that's kind of like the stigma around weed. Like when I was growing up, like if you said weed to my dad, he's just like, you know, to him it's just a sign of laziness, because to the working man who was grafting 8.5 hours a day, they don't realize that they are abnormal human beings. That's not, you have been put into a routine and you've been raised and you've actually taken to it to the point where getting up at 7 in the morning, starting work at 8 and grafting all day with your hands, like, you know, you see these guys who are like 40, 50 and their skin's all big and their hands are huge. It's like, no, that's not, you've affected your body by being put in that routine that we know works, because we've looked at war countries. You know, there was a guy, Michael Malice, who was speaking about how when they went to like kind of Serbia and they seen how they were raising these kids to be like soldiers, and that basically became our education system, because they wanted factory workers during the Industrial Revolution and all the rest of it. And it's like, before that, I mean, it didn't exist, and people were little, tiny, scrawny, skinny human beings. If you go into the museum and you look at armor for like a soldier a couple 100 years ago, he's only about 5 foot tall.
Yeah, and
because
chances are, like,
and they didn't eat as much for the rest of it. And there's all this.
The other thing was, like, for a large part of human history, most people died before they were 12. For like literally until about 100 years ago, most people, like, we're talking like very few people lived past the age of 60. Yeah. And a huge number of people died either during childbirth or not long after it. I've actually, like this is like something that's happened it's happened in Scotland, it's happened right across the West. So America, Europe especially, because of the way that we've looked after our society, we've built hospitals and roads, and we've reduced the burden of infectious disease, and we've improved public health, and we've got clean running water, and we all know to wash our hands and wear a mask.
Like, and we've got there, but we haven't realized that we've got there, and we feel like we're still going somewhere. And it's like, no, we've done it. We've got hygiene, we've got health, we've got food, we've got security. Well, that was it.
We're there.
To do. That was what the Industrial Revolution was for. You know what I mean?
It's like, and the problem is there's a lot of things that haven't changed. So, like, like with regards to school, like, the whole idea was treat children. You know, a human is a machine. A human, you put food in, you get shit out, you get some work done. That's how a machine works, right? Put them into the school, learn 1 times 1 is 1, 2 times 1 is 2, 3 times 1, and learn this by rote. Learn this, sing your little alphabet song and learn this. And that maybe worked at the time, but now we're looking at a point where schools are mandatory, and there are loads of kids. So there's like 10, there maybe like 30 or 40,000 children. Yeah, there's 30 or 40,000 children in Edinburgh right now. So there's like that's a 5-figure some number of people. Like, children need an education, and where are they going to work when they come out? Because we can't all get a job at Argos. We can't all get a job at Ipsos Mori. You know, like, there's.
Joe Rogan says a lot, especially when he's speaking to Elon Musk's. He always says, we need more people like you. Every time Elon Musk goes on a show, everyone's like, we need more people like you. We need more people like you. And almost every single time he's like, get rid of the education system. He's like, get rid of the education system and you'll get more people like me. Like, if you teach them to strive for
I don't know. Elon Musk inherited a lot of his money.
Sorry, because like the thing is that obviously this is what I realize is, like, there's a certain kind of like, the kind of entrepreneurial mind is a really stupid genius, right? Because it's like you're seeing the world in a really unique way, but you don't have the structure of school that like makes it really easy. And so that, you know, when you speak to a lot of people who are like entrepreneurial minded, who left school when they're 16 and go and went, you know, and started building their businesses, right, they'll tell you that life isn't hard, life isn't easy. It's pretty fucking hard. Whereas, like, you know, there's a lot of people who are actually living easier lives who went through the school system and went and got jobs and like got the structure. And that structure is beneficial, and there needs to be a bit more of a balance in the middle. It's like most people are shoved towards the structured lifestyle, but we actually need some more people on the other side to kind of help balance it out, because it's like, you've got the kind of like I said, we've got to a point where we have all the things to solve the inequalities, but we're still producing these people who are there to like build the hospitals that we already have. You know, like we already have all the things. It's like we need maintenance and new ideas now. And those new ideas need people who have more freedom to actually relax in life, take a bit more time and use their brain to try and figure things out, rather than being shoved down the path of till you get to the end.
I think yeah, we need a more for want of a better phrase, that way, a more humanist approach. So rather than like teaching children to be little machines or whatever, and expecting great results from people who are being brutalized by the by the working world, I think being a like, you know, we all love the idea of, you know, outdoor education and you know, schools just going out into the woods and stuff. I mean, I don't have kids, and like I don't plan on having any kids, so I'm not like you know, education's not my I don't know too much about the Scottish education system.
I've got plans. I want to adopt at least one child. Like to be honest, my life goal is really to get myself into a position where I'm comfortable with the way that I'm making my money, and that I make enough money to be comfortable enough to have time to raise at least one child myself. Right? Whether that's with a companion or something, it doesn't really concern me, because I'm more like, I know personally from what I've seen in life that relationship that I would have with that child and the time and the effort that I put into them is more important than necessarily a family dynamic. And that's my own experience. But like, that's kind of my goal, is I want to adopt at least one child. But if I met someone who wanted to conceive a child, I would still have a child. But I just feel like, you know, life is hard, but the reality is, it's like, especially here, is you can pretty much get paid to be homeless in this country. The mental health aspect is what holds people back in those environments. I'm on universal credit now. I've been on it for months. I'm not dying here. Do you know what I mean? Because I've got the mentality that gets me through it. You know, the mental health aspect now doesn't hold me back, that now being on universal credit is comfortable. Whereas 2 years ago, I was on the exact same amount of money, but yet I was homeless, eating shit, no looking after myself, drinking, smoking, blah blah blah. It's really just as a mentality. And when
it's amazing how much like your frame of mind can affect.
That's like the thing, is like your outcomes. What that made me realize is that there's more to be said about the human experience than the way we're being taught to robotically live our lives from the moment we start school at 9 a.m. in primary one. You know,
every day at the same time.
Automatically, because as human beings, we've learned that habits and schedule and things like that are really important. Like, they do help us get stuff done. The only thing is, we're not doing anything that's valuable anymore. Like, you know, we're starting organizations, but most of the people who work in the organization work in an office. They don't actually work hands-on helping people. When I was homeless, I stayed in this accommodation, and basically it's pretty much a house that we had to ourselves. There's 4 or 5 rooms in there. We each get a room. There's a little kitchen. Some guy comes around every day and brings bread, milk, and cereal. And that's pretty much it. And every single one of those people in there is just suffering, because they need to get their medication themselves. They need to go to the doctors themselves. They don't have family and friends around them to help them do these things, that they're just expected to go and get the help. And when you're in a place like that, where mentally everyone is gone, you don't have the motivation to do anything. You don't want to get out of bed. Never mind, the only reason these people ever got out of bed or only did anything was to get the drugs that helped them alleviate the pain of how they were feeling. And what happened when I was there is I started chumming this woman. I was clean when I was in this place. I was almost entirely clean, other than maybe weed and tobacco. I wasn't drinking. I wasn't taking any other drugs. I was trying to eat healthy and stuff. Like, I was trying to get myself better. And what I started doing was I got in a good relationship with this woman. She was in her 40s. She'd like been taken away from her family because she got hooked on painkillers and blah, blah, blah. I started chumming her to the chemist to get her legal meds because I didn't want her going away to these fucking junkies and buying all these shitey drugs that, like, you know, and the thing is when you buy those drugs, they're no regulated. You know, if your doctor gives you a prescription for a week and you go in 2 days later because you finished them, your doctor knows there's another problem there. If you go to a drug dealer and you finish them 2 days later, no one knows. The drug dealer's going to sell you them 2 days later. He doesn't give a fuck how much you're taking. Doesn't care. So I started chumming her to the chemist to get her legal meds. By the time I left that house 4 or 5 months later, she was back with her family. Because because I was there for her, because I was there hands-on with her, face-to-face, understanding her problems every single day and getting her through it, which isn't the care they're given. They're given this, you're given money and shoved to the side, and you're given a place in a house, which is good because that itself is a privilege, but without the mentality and without the actual therapy to get you there, you know, 1 hour a week.
I think this is I think that having a connection with someone's really, really important. I think it's one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that what's the phrase? The opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection. And people fall into hard times. People push their family and friends away, not realizing that their family and friends are there for them, or there are other people they can connect with. And ultimately, like with homelessness, like you'll know yourself, most people who are homeless maybe not because of, but alongside with like mental health problems. Mental health problems are a normal reaction to a shitty world.
Yeah, and I'll tell you where I was going with this thing, right? Because this is what I see is like, I see a lot of people who, like me, have suffered at certain aspects. They're like, you know, I did realize when I got a bit older that actually, you know, like my family's a good family. There's nothing to say about my family, really. It's just the fact that like we've grown up in this kind of working class community, working class way of life, that we've never really aspired to be much more than that. You know, when you live in a working class environment and you kind of just go to school and then you leave and you get your apprenticeship and you go to work, it's like you just recreate the family life that you grew up in, really. And like, you know, and that's one thing. But what I've realized is I've met people who have been through all these things. They've gotten themselves out. They've then got themselves back into education and they've started organizations. But the only people that their organizations help are people like them who are trying to get out. They aren't actually helping the people who are stuck, because there's a difference between your organization and what it represents and raising awareness and getting money and all the rest of it, to someone actually going out with their bare hands every single day like a worker to be with a junkie. Like that is a job no one wants to do, but yet that's what they actually need. They actually need someone who's their friend, who's there every day, who doesn't judge them for their problems, to actually be hand-on and be like, no, bro, come on, get the fuck out of your bed. We're going to the chemist. They need that sober, straight-minded friend. They need that worker. They need the joiner. They need that. I used to in those environments to get them out of these things, and that's where I think the weed environment would really help if there was jobs available in the cannabis industry for the people who are using that as their dependency drug. It would solve the fucking problem of the weed dependency problem.
It would. I think it would certainly. Yeah, I think it would certainly change the dynamic. So initially, first of all, like most people that I've spoken to a lot of people over the last like 3-4 years about weed and about how they use weed and about their experiences of weed. And there are loads of people who all identify with a very, very common experience, which happens normally when we're relatively new to using weed. Normally within the first year, let's say, of smoking weed when you're younger, and you have that really scary thought for the first time, am I an addict? And you're really and you're stoned, so you're kind of paranoid. You're like, oh man, this is terrible. My life's falling apart. Your life's not falling apart, mate. You're 19 and you're too high. It's not really that much to complain about. You're going to wake up tomorrow and it's going to be okay. You know. But this is the thing. Because of that, like people assume that, like I was speaking to someone just the other day who's like, oh, I don't want to smoke weed. It's really bad. Well, I'm like, yeah, but it could be much worse, right? You could be doing something far more harmful, and something, like at the very least, cannabis is a medicine. Just because you didn't buy it from a pharmacy doesn't mean it's not medical.
My experience was that there was periods like when life is hard, right? And like, see, if you're a sober human being, like your problems are a lot more obvious to you because you're not using a substance of any kind.
No buffer.
To as you're relaxing, so you find other ways to kind of get by. And like, you know, I do see the kind of like sober, productive person as being the thing I maybe aspire to be. Maybe not quite, like, I don't like to pick something. I like to kind of have a rough idea. I don't like to solidify certain ideas in my mind. So I don't want to be this guy who's like really sober, who's productive as fuck and all the rest of it. But when I do sober up, the productivity does follow, because it allows me to think more clearly about where my life's actually at, where I want my life to go, and what kind of things I aspire to be. When I was sitting getting stoned every day, that's less of a concern, because you're just wanting to have a nice time every day. You're just like, this is fine. This is all good. Like, life's class. It's amazing. But then when you sober up, you realize, like, wait a minute, I've got no money. I've eaten pizza for the past 3 days. You know, like your whole perspective shifts a little bit. So for me, I'm aiming towards a bit more of a control of how to use it, because I do want to use it for relaxing and to allow my mind to go to new places and stuff like that. But I have found other methods for doing similar things, you know, like, you know,
and I think this is the thing,
into the habit of reading, and you realize that, oh, wait a minute, I'm maybe not quite as dyslexic as I thought. Maybe I just don't know how to read well. Then you start to realize that sitting reading is actually quite nice and comfortable, and you can disappear for 2.5 hours. You know, when I put
and it's this thing that, like,
my headphones on and I start banging the pads, it's like 5 hours later. It's like, whereas when I don't have those things, I'll sit and smoke the joint and put on Netflix. And
I think oftentimes that is
there's for the people who feel like they're becoming addicts, I think it's generally because they're not pursuing something because they can't get themselves aware of it. They're using it too dependently.
They're distracting themselves. And I think it's one of the things
from letting their brain figure out how to get over boredom, for example, rather than getting bored and being like, right, I need to do something. What do? You roll the joint, and it solves the problem, rather than actively doing something. So
at the start, there's an
idea that comes to mind. I'm not saying, like, you know, if someone's got their life where they want it to be and they want to sit and have fucking eat pizza for 3 days watching Netflix, I feel like that should be their choice. But they should have an educated an
informed choice.
An informed choice. It shouldn't be a thing that they do because they don't know how to solve the problem of boredom. They should just know that that's one option.
Yeah, well, this is it. I mean, this is one of the things you've hit on a really important idea there, and that's like, so you felt the symptom. The symptom is boredom. I mean, there's two ways that we can go around thinking about this problem, and essentially what it comes down to is, are we thinking with our brain or are we thinking with our gut? Our gut tells us, roll the joint, sit down, you'll be less bored in half an hour, right? So you take the easy way out. And this is one of my little philosophies in life, which is that humans aren't good or evil. That's not useful. Humans, however, are very lazy, and we will always take the easiest option. So sometimes, and like for example, 2020 is the perfect example of rolling the joint just being the easy option. Loads of people during the first lockdown last March.
Here's a modern day one, right? When you get workies who are like really kind of like productive guys, and there's a lot of them who look at the weed smokers still and they see them as lazy cunts. So like, oh, you're just a fucking lazy bastard. And it's like, oh really? Is that why you're driving up to the shop that's 5 minutes from your house? It would take you 2 seconds to walk to, but you're calling me a lazy bastard, even though you're driving a car to the shop that's 5 minutes from your house. Like,
I mean, like,
in the world I grew up, people are getting this. They go to the big Tesco, and it's like, there's a shop just over there. Like, I don't know why you're going to drive. You're going to get out of your house, jump in a car, drive 10 minutes down the road to a bigger shop to get stuff you didn't need that you could have got at the small shop that's just 2 seconds from your house. It's just such a kind of, it's a hypocrisy in a weird way.
I think it all comes down to experience.
We develop these tools and technologies because we don't want to do them.
Yeah, well, it all comes down to experience. There are a lot of people, again, who just kind of are so used to taking the easy way, are so used to,
I was one of them.
Like jump in the car, run over to Sainsbury's or whatever, get your bits and pieces. And it's easy to do, and people are used to being told. Like, this is the other thing. Like, what's the phrase? Thinking is hard, so I prefer when someone else tells me how to do it. Right? Thinking is hard. It's really difficult to be disciplined, and it's really hard to sit down and do the slow work. Because this is what I was saying earlier about the brain and the gut. Your gut is very good at quick thinking. Your gut will keep you alive. If you're walking through the jungle and there's like a tiger stalking you, your gut will tell you to run. Your brain, however, can build you a treehouse. Your brain, however, can build a trap to catch the tiger. Your brain does the slow work. Your brain does the kind of careful work, but it's not easy. It's not easy, and it's not quick. It's antithetical. Exactly. And this is the thing, like when I'm working hard, like I can generally gauge how productive I've been on a day by how much I've eaten. If I eat loads, it's because, like, if I'm working really hard, if I'm like if I'm doing like my books for the business, or if I'm working on my website, or if I'm like reading a book for uni, like if I'm really going at it with the deep thought, fucking like the strain vein on my head comes out, and I'm eating everything: bananas, crisps, apples, protein bars. Give me some tofu. Let's get some pasta on the go. We'll maybe phone someone, bring some. I will eat everything in the house.
Here's another thing as well, right? This is another thing I realized when I was through mental illness, and it kind of ties into procrastination. That procrastination is a ruminating thought process, where like you're putting these ideas in your head that like you're either not doing enough, or you should be doing something else, and you start to come, and that itself is you thinking about something, and then you start to eat and you start to consume in other ways to like fulfill that thing. When I was going through mental health issues, one of the things that you also realize with people who are suffering mental health, or people who are hooked on drugs and the rest of it, is their diets are fucking terrible. And without getting the right food into you, and without getting a consistent diet, like your body doesn't eat, like you don't just eat a burger and get fat. It's like you would need to, for your body to start absorbing fats in that way, you need to be consistently eating fat burgers. Do you know what I mean? Your body takes time to adapt, and your body diet, like that ratio and thing, it's a time frame. It doesn't just happen like eat a vegetable, feel nice. No, you have to keep eating vegetables.
Yeah. Well, this is it. Like it takes about
the food that they get is just fucking shocking. Like how is the food that they're given supposed to get them out of a hole? It's impossible.
I mean, the food that we eat, like it's something that goes right back like thousands of years. The food that you eat should be your medicine. Like you should be able to, like, I'm not saying that all diseases can be prevented with a good diet, but a lot of diseases can be prevented with a good diet. Yeah. I've got a drink in my fridge from a Danish company called Super Malt. Got it in Tesco. I saw it. I was like, I'll have one of those. Tastes a bit like licorice. It's it's a malt drink, so it's almost like an.
I think it's nice. Have
you had it?
I have quite a lot of like malt drinks in kind of like Central America and stuff like that as well.
Yes, and do you know why? They drink these because they have lots of B vitamins in them, and there's a disease called pellagra that you can eradicate when you give everyone vitamin B. You can decrease the number of people catching this disease. Think about like things like scurvy and rickets. You don't really hear about many people getting scurvy and rickets anymore because we get enough vitamin C and vitamin D from our food. And this is the thing, like you go back like a couple 100 years ago, and even like the food people are eating then isn't really, I mean, let's be honest, some of the diet, like I've done work, like I've worked in social care. I've done some volunteering work with the homeless community in Edinburgh going way back. I've helped out at like soup kitchens and stuff. And yeah, we do the best, society, the good people in society do the best with the tools that we're given. But when you're looking at like leftover foods and bits of dry bread and, thin soup, it's not surprising that like you particularly in families with a low income, you just tend to see more problems with health, because if your diet isn't there, your mental health and your physical health are going to suffer. I remember when I was like years ago, when I was like in the early 20s, I went through quite a bit of a funk with my depression, and for about a month, near enough every day I had a Subway. I mean, maybe not every day, but like, if like that was, and I wouldn't eat breakfast. I'd just go out and get
because I was just going to say, do you think I was going to say, well, you're missing breakfast, but the thing with Subways as well is like they're really high calorie. So you get a lot of energy just from having one meal. And I think when you're going through mental health issues, like you don't really want to cook. I'm a single guy and I don't want to cook for myself. I can't be fucked cooking meals and everything. Like I honestly feel like, if this is 2021, especially when you look at how much money some people in the world do have, I should be able to buy a fucking meal every day instead of cook. That's why I genuinely
right?
feel that now.
And
I'm at that point now where I'm like, I value cooking, and I value having the skill of knowing how to cook, because even the people who I know who can cook good meals and do cook for themselves have got no idea what they're doing. They're just following a recipe, and it's usually shite most of the time. Like, they're using salt in the wrong way, they're using sugar in the wrong way, and they're not really getting the most nutrients of their food because they don't understand cooking. They're just following a recipe. I'm definitely an advocate for that. But at the same time, I'm definitely an advocate for being like, I want to fucking buy my food. I want to pay some guy to cook me food. This is 2021. I want to pay for some guy to
bring it to me
and get it fucking in me every day.
There's a really different culture in, like, say, like if you went over to Europe, they have a much more sort of eat out, or culture. So in the UK, we love getting our we in the UK we love getting our food delivered to us, but we're encouraged to eat in and cook for yourself more. In Europe, people don't use their kitchen as much. Like they're more, and they're less likely to have food like delivered to them. They're more likely to go out to a little cafe or go to the little restaurant on the corner. And I think this is something that, like, I don't know, like, my experience of Scotland is limited. Like, I've not lived here my whole life, and I've not traveled the whole breadth of Scotland, so I can't comment on every community. But I remember going into a little cafe in a former mining town that will remain nameless, a little cafe where for £1.85 you got a cup of tea, 2 slices of toast, egg, bacon, beans, sausage, and black pudding. Oh yeah, totally. But where's the like when there's a really big difference between the bargain on the sheet and what arrives on the plate, and you're like, oh right, that's what my money's getting me. And this is kind of the problem. Like, I think it's the idea that as long as you're eating something, like, it'll fill a hole. I think this is one of the things that, like, it's something that poverty does, is it changes how we eat, specifically by changing what kind of food we can eat. So you're more likely to go for the chips, more likely to go for the pizza or the chicken or whatever's greasy and salty, high calorie.
I'm fighting myself on a daily basis between two mentalities. One of them just wants to eat to fill a hole because I don't have fucking time to think about what I'm fucking eating. Like, I just want to get something in me, get the energy, and get the fuck on with my day. The other side of my brain's telling me, like, but if you pay attention to your food, you can plan your diet out, and it's better for your body, and then you'll be more productive, and you'll feel like you're being more successful in your day. But that old way of thinking is still just like, just fucking eat something and go. Why are you overthinking this? Like, because it doesn't want you to think, it wants you to survive. It's like a survival instinct way of eating. You want to kill the whole, get on so you can live to the end of the day. Whereas this one's like, you're gonna live to be tomorrow. Kill the fuck out. Have something.
Yeah, this is it. Like I say, man, that you got the gut brain and you've got your brain. So your gut brain wants the food now. Your gut brain, like, basically. And this is the thing. There's a little part of your brain. So there's loads of nervous tissue in your gut. So there's as much nervous tissue in your gut as there is in your brain. And there's for want of a better phrase, there's a cable that runs from your brain to your gut, and they speak
relates to the endocannabinoid system as well, because there's endocannabinoids all over the body, and then the gut there's
throughout. Yeah, so the brain and the guts are both full of endocannabinoid receptors. They're both very active regions, and they talk to one another. And this is really it's something that that people are now starting to understand through researching psychedelics. So after, like, say, for example, you've done the Joe Rogan diet and you've had a big feed of DMT or a big bag of mushrooms or something, whatever. And for maybe like 3 to 6 months afterwards, there's a little part of your brain that's a little bit more active than it would have been otherwise. And that little part of your brain is the part of your brain that connects with your gut. So I have this little pet theory that when we use psychedelics, and especially when we use psychedelics with intention, but even just generally, there is this lasting effect afterwards where our gut brain and our head brain are a wee bit more understanding of one another. I mean, the gut brain, here's one of my favorite examples of like to give people an idea of how your gut thinks for itself. Sugar cravings. You don't feel hungry. You're not thirsty. You just need sugar. It needs to be sweet. It needs to be chewy and crunchy and sticky. It needs to be sugar, and I need it now. There they are, the rings, peach rings. This is it, man. Like, and it's not hunger. You can eat food. You don't want food. I don't want potatoes. I don't want broccoli or a steak. I want sugar. And that's your gut brain. That's your gut talking. That's where, and it's not even just your gut, it's the bacteria in your gut pushing the buttons. It's really, really weird.
If I get this energy, mate, I'll get to the end of the day. That's all.
Well, this is it. Essentially, like it's when we eat food, like what happens is like the bacteria in our guts break down the food, and then our guts absorb what the bacteria have produced. And the bacteria are just like people; they're lazy as fuck. They don't want to put the hard work in. Why would you? Why would you put in sugar's easy, just goes straight in. And because of that, like we get these cravings because the gut just goes, give me the sugar. And it takes about a month for your gut to adjust. It takes about 30 days, maybe a little bit longer, but most people about a month. If you were to cut out sugar today, by the middle of March, your gut biology, your gut kind of balance would have adjusted itself.
Maybe we should do an experiment, because I do eat quite a bit of sugar, and I'm definitely aware of it as being a bit of an issue. It's definitely still a comfort thing, because when, like I said, it's easy. And so when you're depressed and like, you know, and you don't want to cook and stuff, going for a pack of sweets is the easiest thing to fill that.
It does itself. Yeah, totally.
Give you the energy to kind of like get through it. And when you're, especially when you're going through homelessness, it gives you something to do, because you don't want to cook.
Mm-hmm.
So going to the shop and get yourself a bag of sweets is almost like it's almost like that's like your work for the day. Like, I've got to go and grab a bag of gems. Yeah,
and this is it. Like yeah, I'm just like in general, like we can do better. I think it's my kind of again. I don't want to prattle on too much about my little philosophy of life, but
fuck everyone else if they don't like your philosophy.
Yeah, cool. So the philosophy comes in. It's really, really simple, and it's that you can't always improve your circumstances, but you can always look to improve yourself. And that's where you start, and that's where you stay. It's not about, you know, I don't need a big house or a big car. I can be a better person tomorrow than I was yesterday, and that's more important than my bank balance. I can do better. I can improve myself. I can use what I have to help other people. And in doing that, I have improved my connection to others, and so on and so forth. So what I tend to do, like the way I just kind of think is like, you know, focus on making the right choices, focus on the choices that you have. And as long as you're focused on that and focused on making yourself as best as you can, you're going to be fine.
I mean, I think, you know what I think? I think one of the things I think weed and mindfulness are something that go really well together, because they do something psychologically that's very similar, and they make you aware of things like right now, things that you're not usually aware of. They put your mind into a place where you can't, where you wouldn't really, you know. It's like if you're walking down, it's like if you're standing outside this like 4-story building, all of a sudden, if you're smoked a joint for like the first time, you'll be fucking away with it. You'll be thinking about the fact that this building is full of like people who are all sitting at screens. There's electricity going everywhere. There's water, there's pipes, there's all this stuff. And it's like, you're watching this big, like, and then you realize that it's like a building, and it's just like this little building with all these little, like, if you thought of those humans as being bacteria, it's like that building has a purpose. Stuff comes in, it solves something, and then something comes out. Like, you start to think a bit more deeply about things. Mindfulness for me, in terms of your body, it's like you get to this point where on your day-to-day life, you're not constantly thinking about how you feel. But when you start to feel uneasy and you start to witness the things in your life, like you say, you can change you can't change necessarily your circumstance, but you can change yourself. Mindfulness and weed allow you to become a bit more aware of what it is that you're actually experiencing at any given moment. And when you learn that, you can then see where you need to change things and which things need more or less attention. If you find that you're getting really fidgety and anxious at night, you become aware rather than just instinctively going for the thing that's going to solve that thing. You become more aware of how you're actually feeling, and that there's something there to feel that's pushing you. You know, you become aware of the driving force. In your day-to-day life, you're not really aware of the driving force. You just let it kind of drive you. And that's a good thing. But at the same time, when you become more mindful of how your body feels, you'll be shocked at the kind of stuff that your body goes through on a day-to-day basis. Like mine, just playing Call of Duty on my phone. I started playing Call of Duty mobile, and I'd smoke a joint, and I'd be running around doing really well at the game, but I'd be having a great time. Now that I've stopped smoking, and I've stopped smoking tobacco, and I've stopped cut down the drinking, like everything, and I'm fairly clean, I'll be lying in bed, and as soon as I get shot on like Battle Royale, I'll be fucking raging. And having done a lot of mindfulness meditation, I'll all of a sudden realize that I'm fucking sweating buckets in bed because I'm fucking like, and I'm all tense. My legs are like up like this, and I'm like fucking like that, and I'm like, all of a sudden I become aware of what I'm like, and I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? And I'm like taking my top off because I'm sweating my nut off, and it's like I never would have realized any of that shit before. I don't think if you're mindful, I think you just get raging and you stand up and you're like, fuck that guy, and you chuck the phone away.
I think, a lot of people just take experience for granted. They just let things happen and assume that that's how it's supposed to be. But again, like, when we take, you'll know yourself from practicing mindfulness, that when we take the time to sit down and question our motives and question our thoughts and just observe what's happening in the present, I think most people are capable of great change. They just don't realize it.
It's like it is that thing. It's like mindfulness. I mean, I've definitely come to the conclusion that, not to say that weed's invalid, because obviously I've been quite an avid smoker for a while, but mindfulness and meditations have been more beneficial for me than drugs in terms of my awareness and how I feel and how I react to myself. When you, like, one thing that people have when they smoke weed is they become very blatantly aware of their thoughts, and they become very blatantly aware of the fact that you obviously can't be those thoughts, or otherwise how would you be able to see them, right? And that freaks people the fuck out. That's one of those existential things when people experience. They're like, what the fuck? They feel very like existential, and it freaks them the fuck out. That's the one thing I've seen in weed that people get a bit scared.
If I'm listening,
happened to them, their awareness and the way that your mind works is just putting you in a slightly different position. When you
it's like if I'm talking and I'm listening, and
when you get into mindfulness and stuff like that, and they have this in religions where they pray and all the rest of it, like there's a certain level of awareness that sucks you back a little bit through mindfulness, and you become so much more aware of things in a calm way rather than a kind of freak out way. You kind of start to settle back, and you're like, well, of course these are my thoughts. It becomes so much more obvious. And when you become aware of those things, you're not walking about your whole day thinking about every time a thought pops into your head. Have you ever done those headspace exercises where they tell you to kind of do a meditation? Every time a thought pops up, you pop the bubble and you forget about it. Thought pops up, pop the bubble, forget about it. You're not like that all day. I'm not running around popping every fucking thought bubble that pops into my head. I'm taking time out my day to understand that there's a difference between my emotions, my feelings, my thoughts, and my sensations. And once you become aware of those things in that 15-minute meditation, you go away from that, but you become subconsciously aware. It's a subconscious tool that you're teaching yourself to become aware of these things, so that, for example, if someone gets really angry at you and the anger bubbles up, instead of punching someone, the automatic reaction becomes you're aware of the reaction of your emotions bubbling. You become aware of the thoughts that pop into your head. You don't act on it. You become aware. And that's what meditation has taught me, is it teaches me to be aware of a situation as it arises rather than automatically reacting in what are essentially negative situations. And I have it when someone's in my face and they get really angry, I can just be on the outside really, really calm. And there's a phenomenon with humans. If someone's really angry and you can genuinely be calm, no one will hit you. They'll no touch you. There's just something in a human beings don't want to hit people who are genuinely not on their level. You have to anger someone a little bit or change their emotions. You have to have control over them before you
give them an excuse.
Yeah. But see, when it happens, I can be up in someone's face being like, look, man, what's happening? Like, you just relax. But inside, I'm boiling. My heart's racing, my nerves are firing. I'm ready to kind of hit someone. It's my instinct from being younger and being angry that I just want to go back up and like deal with the situation.
That's the
I'm
power
aware
of
that. I'm
power
aware
of
of that
meditation.
environment now, and it's like mindfulness meditation, and like the deeper you get into it, the more you realize like it's an extremely powerful tool. And
Absolutely,
I think weed could be used in something like that. Like remember I mentioned the other day, like the kind of spiritual aspect of it and the kind of like psychotherapy aspect of it. It could be used for kind of giving people a bit of an insight into what these things are, mindfulness and yoga and all this. Like we do them for a reason, and people, average persons, they don't understand why we do it. Take a bit of cannabis and you might start to realize.
Well, this is it. I think that's a really interesting point. Like, a lot of people don't understand why you would want to, and it's like, well, have you tried?
Yeah.
Again,
People are like, oh, I've tried
experience
meditation, but it wasn't really for me. And I'm like, well, it wasn't for me when I started either. It's called a
Yeah, it's not
practice.
supposed. You're not supposed to like it. It's not the point. Like, I've been practicing meditation for a couple of years, and I still think it's a pain in the arse. Like, it's never. I've never. I don't think I've ever stopped complaining about it.
It's
But I've
because
never
it takes energy to do. That's the thing. It's like
Yeah.
it takes energy to sit and meditate. Like
Yeah.
it's not like it's not the same as relaxing. Meditation is not a relaxing experience.
No.
It's an energetic experience, really.
Work.
And
It's
the deeper
work
you
is
get,
what
the
it
more
is.
you like, the more activated you feel. And that's the thing, is that once you get into that routine of like making yourself do it, that's that extra level that we have as human beings that I think is the thing that other animals can't quite tap. Is the fact that you can step back, you can actually tell yourself to sit down for 15 minutes and go within, and then come out of it feeling more energized, even though it was a fucking pain in the arse to do. Like, and it does take a lot of practice to get into mindfulness.
Man, I'd say, my battery on my phone's running low, so I'm down to about 10%. So
okay. Well, quickly give yourself a wee plug again just now, and then
cool.
We'll be done.
Right, cool. So quick plug. So yeah, my name is Dan. My business is the Hemp Community. The Hemp Community is a social enterprise. We were the first CBD shop in the UK. We ran a shop on Great Junction Street for 3 years. We currently have our business located at the Biscuit Factory in Leith. We sell CBD products. We have hundreds of different products on the website, and we have a lot of experience in supporting people on how to use CBD for their health. If you've got any questions, or if you just want to chat about weed, that's what we're here for.
Nice.
Oh yeah, and the website is hempcommunity.scot.
.scot, class. I do like a .scot website, to be honest.
I love a .scot, man. I currently own maybe 5 or 6 different .scot domains.
Yeah.
Because you never just buy one, right? Don't want to send any spoilers out there, but you may or may not be looking at the owner of weed.scot.
Whoa, that will be worth some money one day, probably, bro.
Man, cash in. I'm going to retire on that one.
One thing I did want to ask, I guess maybe because people might want to know, and if they've made it this far, then class, but where do you think we're at then in terms of recreational use of weed being legalized in the UK or Scotland?
Realistically, we're only ever really just around the corner. It's always one of with the legalization of cannabis and the movement behind the legalization of cannabis, it's always just around the corner. It's always just out of grasp. The problem is, and I hate to mix my metaphors, but the problem is they keep shifting the goalposts. We bend backwards, they drop the limbo pole a little bit lower. We're a couple of years away. It probably won't happen in the same way that it's happened in America, and it probably won't happen in the same way that it's happened in Canada, but it will happen in a way that hopefully Scottish people get to choose. It's one of the things that I'm working towards. It's something that I do a lot in my day-to-day is think about how do we get this message forward that the people who are best informed on the use of cannabis and the regulation of cannabis may in fact be the people who use cannabis and speak about it openly and know how it works. And, essentially you wouldn't buy a car from someone who doesn't drive. So why would you buy cannabis or trust cannabis to someone who doesn't use it? It seems a little bit illogical. So hopefully within a few years, like my guess is always within 5 years, but it really depends on what happens at Westminster, because drug policy is reserved to the central government.
I see the people in kind of Westminster as being a bit like my dad. You say weed and they just go, like, they just don't want to have the conversation because they don't use it. They don't need it.
They don't use it. It doesn't. Yeah.
If they have experienced it, it's been negative probably, and and then that's just been they're like, oh, it's bad for you.
Yeah.
I think everyone reacts the same, and it's because
you've hit on a really, really good point there, and that's that they don't use it and they don't need it, and that's a really good point, because I guarantee you that if an MP's child required medical cannabis oil, they would have it. I guarantee you that if an MP themselves wanted to get some medical cannabis on prescription, it would have happened by now, but it doesn't affect them, and because of that, they're not willing to change. Unfortunately, I was just going to say, unfortunately, that like
as well, so
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, statistically
No, no.
speaking, 50% of people have used cannabis. So if you were to look at the parliament, there's probably at least 300 of the MPs have used cannabis, probably more because most of them went to university, which kind of increases the chances a little bit because university towns tend to have a lot of weed. But it's a very common human experience. The problem is the great dichotomy with cannabis is that for those people who don't need it, for those people who are healthy and happy, can just get on with their life, it doesn't really matter to them. It doesn't affect a politician what I do with my spare time. It does affect me. It does affect millions of people up and down the country who are either using cannabis illegally or, even worse, have been denied the opportunity to use cannabis for their health, knowing that it would have been good for them, but it would also have run the risk of landing them in prison. There are a lot of people who could use medical cannabis who don't because they're scared of going to jail, and it's just not right. It's not right, and we can do better. Again, hopefully my guess would be like within 5 years, we'll see some kind of regulated market. And again, I don't think it'll not be too similar to the American or Canadian system, which is broadly speaking quite commercial. Hopefully, I would like to think that we can steer it to be a bit more of a balanced discussion about risks and responsibilities and about benefits and gains as well as what can go wrong. So we need to have an honest conversation, change up the language, and frankly, we all just need to sit down and just have some weed, because I think experience is the greatest teacher. And once people start to realize that the world, the sky isn't going to fall in on us, then I think maybe we can start moving forward and having a bit more of a progressive time of things.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I definitely have, this is where the kind of like spiritual aspect of drugs comes in. And I kind of believe this for all drugs, because I think that all clean drugs taken in a safe manner in the right situation for the right person could be like, is not really likely to be a negative experience if it's if it's in some kind of controlled way. And
Yep.
like, I think that on a kind of spiritual experience kind of level, we should all have access to an experience like that and be allowed to.
Yeah.
Technically, in this country at least, we are free to the extent where you can get a passport, you can go to South America, you can go to a tribal village, and you can have an ayahuasca experience. But
Who
I
can
don't
afford
want to
that?
have to travel halfway around the world to try an experience that I could try just 2 seconds around the corner from my house. Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Like, just because
Hopefully,
it's like,
yeah.
it is one of those things, like, I don't necessarily know. I've got really deep with my meditation now. And for me, it is quite deep and spiritual in a certain sense. And I don't necessarily know if now I want to try some of those kind of drugs. But in terms of something like weed, this whole conversation, like, it's just fucking pointless to me. Like, it just, when you look at how it's being treated around the world, you're just like, how are we even having this discussion that it's legal?
It's bizarre that like we still have to go we still have to go over the same points. Like, I mean, if you look at the cannabis advocates in the UK, they've been beating the same drum for like 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years. Nothing's ever changed. And I think, again, like, the government keep moving the goalposts. They're not engaging in good faith. They're not engaging with a view of making things better. They're engaging with a view of maintaining control, which they've managed to do so far, but at great expense, enormous expense.
So for people using it for both health, for both medicinal and recreational, and just like, there are people who are just healthy people who are using it for, like, I know people who are skaters who use rubs and stuff like that as well. And like, there are people who are just using it in ways that really, like, they're not taking oil drops and they're not trying to be super duper healthy. They just have to use a muscle rub. So they're getting the one with CBD because they've got the money to do so. What advice could you give anyone, any kind of weed user, any kind of non-weed user who wants to see it kind of like change? What can we start to do? Are there organizations that we can start to, like, get involved with, or sign petitions, or what can we actually do about it as the public?
I'm a little bit cynical about signing petitions, just because, again, we've been doing that for decades and nothing's changed. I think the most important thing we can do, and I think it's as individuals, the most important thing we can do is talk. Tell people that we use cannabis, show people by our actions that we're not dangerous ne'er-do-wells, and that we're not we're not ushering in the apocalypse. We're just chilling out, and actually we're pretty happy, healthy people, and we're good neighbors, we're good workers, we're good friends. We're your families, we're in your communities, we're part of the fabric of society, and that's never going to change. And you might as well just get used to it and maybe just try some yourself.
I know, and you know what the thing is, like, you know what, maybe like, I'm maybe like a bit of a strange dude. Maybe I like to write the odd rap or like play a bit of music in the street or something like that. Maybe I'm that kind of person. But like, you're all buying fucking Kanye West music. So I mean, what he's obviously like, people like crazy people, but yet when it comes to like here, they come into the city or whatever, and all of a sudden you're this kind of like dopey weirdo, and it's like, wait, what? But you like dopey weird? Like if I said Snoop Dogg, you're going to instantly smile. Because like he's just and it's like, but that's cool, but that's the whole fucking
again
people here admire Americans for being such outrageous human beings, but then when they experience one here, they're like, oh nah, get the fuck in my face, like you fucking dopey weirdo. Like, it's like, no, I'm just a normal human being like these people. I'm just not like you.
I think that's the thing. We like eccentric weirdos. We just like them at a distance.
Yeah, that's the thing. That is exactly it. That's been my experience of life. Like, I don't know what it is about me, and I guess some of the people that I know. Like, I know normal fucking people, and those people can, like, there are normal people who accept me for who I am. But the ones who are like, that are just totally against weed, to just like, there's just something about the kind of hippy dippy person they just dislike. And I honestly think they're just clinging on to a past that doesn't exist anymore. You know what I mean?
Pretty much, they've had their mind made up for them by newspapers. But frankly, the world is always changing, and eventually, the gravity only pulls us one way.
The future. It's all about the future. Yeah. There's literally a building in Amsterdam where robots are growing food, and like that is happening right now. And people are just like still arguing about all this shite that to me just looks like absolute shite. I'm like, why are we having these conversations when we've literally got robots growing our food for us?
Yeah, wasting time.
I want more freedom in life to be able to be creative, and I feel like that's what, like you said, like we're quite lazy beings, really. And I think like it's been our kind of goal since the Industrial Revolution to make technology work for us, and instead we're still slaving for it. And it just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense to me.
So far.
We've got the technology to get us from A to B without destroying the planet. We've got the technology to grow our food. We've got the technology to make our food. We've got the technology to communicate. We've got all the technology there, and everyone's just still flapping on about why weed's illegal. I'm like, just everyone's like, at the same time, you've still got homeless people on the street who don't have access to nice food. When you've got like people here who are spending £25 a day on takeaway meals, sitting in their house doing nothing. Like, that's the kind of country we live in. It's the kind of privilege we live in, and I think people need to be aware of it. I think you're right, though. I think we're doing it now by having the conversations, and that's why it's Fubu's Future Podcast, because I think this is it. We need to just start being open about it and start talking about stuff and putting our voice out there. When this goes on YouTube, it's there.
Absolutely.
And that's the most important thing. Is just fucking say your piece and get it out. People put on their Instagram story them smoking a joint. It's like, yeah, that's cool for your 1,700 followers, but no one's going to share that. It's not going to change anything. Actually,
it's also not real life.
Yeah,
have a real conversation.
But no, man, absolute pleasure having you on. That was a good chat. Like, honestly, I feel like we could sit and talk about weed for hours and hours and hours and hours. Yeah. But anyone though who's like against the kind of health fanatic who wants to use CBD oils and wants to use the rubs and wants to smoke a bit of weed or whatever, you can just take a fucking run and jump. Like, what's it got to do with you? Like, just get on with your life. Like, stop restricting our usage because you didn't care. It's got nothing to do with you. Like,
live and let live.
Yeah, like honestly, legalize fucking weed so we can start making some fucking monies.
Yeah, tell me about it. Get some coin.
Legalize weed. Just tax it. We're still going to do it, whether you tax it or not. You've taxed the booze, you've taxed the sugar, you've taxed the kerosene.
Yeah, tax, jobs,
so
industry, save the planet. It'd be absolutely great. Dude, it was an absolute pleasure. I will catch you later.
Yeah, for sure, man. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for coming on. Thanks for having me on, Reese.
Yeah, see you in a bit.
Bye.